Hello, very beautiful community. Officials in Putin's regime are ringing economic alarm bells. I've picked out a couple of quotes for us, but I could have picked out many more. Elvira Nabiullina, governor of the Central Bank of Russia, says, "We grew for 2 years at relatively fast tempos because we activated untapped resources, untapped workforce capacity, untapped industrial capacity, new niches that appeared as a result of Western companies leaving, saved resources and investments which we could deploy, spare capital in the banking system. But," quote continues, "we need to understand that these resources are now used up, and we need to think of other ways to grow," end of quote, which really means short of significant restructuring or change, the economy is facing stagnation. Now, let's have a look at Mr. Maxim Reshetnikov, who is Minister of Economic Development. "According to our official numbers," quote, "we have a cooling, but they just give us, these numbers just give us a rear view impression. Looking at current indicators ongoingly, we're actually on the verge of recession." Now, note when Putin's officials speak, they have to underspeak and they have to under-reference the elephant in the room, which is Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Now, you are fatigued by endless talk about Russia's imminent economic collapse every Tuesday over the last 3 years, on the one hand. So you're experiencing epistemic fatigue because you know that the algorithm is set up to tell you that Russia's economy is collapsing, whether it is or it isn't, and that's because the algorithm knows that you collectively like to hear that. And you have fatigue from having your own wishes over intensely and overly repetitively realized, your wishful thinking wishes. Now, on the other hand, something is very wrong with the Russian economy, and Russian officials are speaking out about it. So how do you balance the two? Well, we're going to do, because I'm actually getting so much correspondence about this, because people want to know how to ground themselves around, is this, a real problem for the Russians right now, or is the story being overblown? We'll do this. Today we'll do just a very short grounding. Number one thing to understand, there's a certain kind of magical thinking involved in the very use of the term economic collapse. Because what's largely meant is not economic collapse, but social and political collapse. By economic collapse, people largely mean degradation of state capacity, social upheaval, and destabilization of the regime. So what's actually meant there isn't economic collapse, but a complex relationship that isn't specified between economic reality and perception of economic reality and social, political, state, regime consequences. The ultimate picture, when you're thinking about regime instability, is that three things probably have to be in place. Number one, there has to be a crack in the regime that is of an existential kind. Number two, there has to be social mobilization within the country that is based on a perception of that crack in the top of the regime. And three, there has to be leadership which narrates the crack in the regime and the civic mobilization and tries to guide the civic mobilization accordingly. When we talk about such leadership, do not make the mistake that it is more likely to be a Navalny than a Prigozhin type figure. So first of all, understand that there's a little bit of conceptual fluff just in the very talk of economic collapse. But what is the state of Russia's economy and how much of a threat to the regime is it? I would only recommend, because we're going to try to be under 7 minutes today, 2 brief observations. The first is that the state of the economy is a synergistic threat to the regime. Together with all the other factors on the table, it may or may not constitute a threat to Putin. But that depends on your analysis of all the other social and political factors at hand. which is to say a purely economic analysis will never get you to an understanding of what the state of the economy implies for the regime stability. So the threat is synergistic. The second takeaway I want you to come away with is that it's my analysis that the current load of economic challenge the regime is facing is unbearable for the regime without change. Unbearable without change. But the regime has plenty of capacity to make changes. It could stop the war in a year and then restart it later and engage in some kind of provocation in another domain against the West. Or it could persist while compensating for the challenges it's facing by a series of authoritarian, totalitarian turns that progress, a likely scenario. So it's a synergistic story, and it's a reality whereby in the short to medium term, there are unbearable challenges unless the regime adjusts. And we're going to be watching how the regime does that. Much more depth on this to come. Lots and lots of love, beautiful community.